Good afternoon. Attending today's Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. The hearing today for this committee will note that the hour has come and a quorum of the committee is present. Mr. McMonagle, can you please call the attendance?
Councilman Driscoll.
Present.
Councilwoman Gautier.
Present.
Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson. Councilmember Squilla.
Present.
Councilmember Young.
Present.
Thank you. A quorum committee is present. The hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing on the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development regarding bills number 240582 and resolution number 240314. Bill number 240098 is being held at the request of the sponsor and will not be heard at this hearing today. Mr. McMonagle, can you please read the title of the bills and resolution?
Can you acknowledge Councilman Phillips first?
Before we read the title of the bills, Councilman Phillips?
No, just acknowledge it.
Also acknowledging Councilmember Phillips is present for the hearing. Mr. McMonagle, can you please read the title of the bill and resolution?
Bill number 240582, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-4400 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Responsible Business Operations by amending the definition of critical nuisance businesses and further clarifying an obstruction of an investigation, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. Can we please call the first panel? Do we have to testify on bill number 240582?
Can we please have Francis Healy?
Before we hear for testimony, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this bill 240582, I'm the prime sponsor of this legislation, and what we're trying to do here is address an issue that I've seen in my district with the implementation of the the responsible business operations ordinance. This is a new piece of legislation that has been implemented this year, and for me, the premise behind this legislation, behind this change, is because there have been instances where police discretion is involved, and we want to just get some clarity on when that discretion is used, how it's used, and to make sure that there's uniformity across the city when this particular bill is being enacted and implemented. There was an instance where a property owner who is a business owner who has been a lawful business owner for a number of years was deemed to be critically nuisance after one incident within the past, 20-something years outside of his business, right? And so when you shut that business owner down, who's a senior, by the way, he's probably like almost in his 80s, so trying to operate and navigate a particular system when you're in your 80s could be a little difficult when you're not getting the response, when you're not getting the communication that you are supposed to be getting in a manner to try to get your business establishment open again. So this business had to close, was closed for almost over a month. There were employees who could not go to work for over a month because of the lack of communication between the police department and this business owner. And unfortunately, the business owner had to take his wife to the hospital today, so he's not able to be here to testify to his effect, but he did send a message over. So I just want to provide my colleagues, I guess, with a little clarity on the situation. And from this is his perspective now. The owner's name is Jake Adams. He owns the Barbers Hall facility at 1400 block of Oxford Street. Basically says the city of Philadelphia should check the businesses out if there are any incidents that have occurred within the last 2 years, if they want to take action. He wants to make sure that the city is checking facts to know that the customers or the potential victims or were actually customers, or if the perpetrators were actually customers of that particular business before they are able to get shut down. And he just wants the folks to know that he loves his business, but because of this incident, now he believes it's time for him to move on, right? He's a long-standing business owner of our city, and being shut down by the city of Philadelphia has caused him to realize that maybe he should not be in business anymore. When this one incident that occurred, only this one incident at his establishment within the last, I don't know how many years, deemed him to be critically nuisance. So in his mind, he thinks that the city of Philadelphia thinks he's a nuisance business. Therefore, he should not be in operation. And all the folks on this panel and folks in the, some folks who are here listening know what Barbers Hall is and what Barbers Hall means to North Philadelphia community. So for him to think that his business is now a critical nuisance business and it should not be in operation, it just saddens my heart, because that's a place that I've been going to for a long time. And we want to make sure that we are keeping businesses open in this city, open for good businesses open in this city, because they're good tax-paying businesses and they're businesses that hire from the local communities. And so we should not be in the business of deeming folks to be critically nuisance, right? Just for the fact that an incident has happened around their particular business. So I'm just looking to get some clarity from the administration on this issue, on the implementation of it, on if there are any regulations associated with this particular bill, and how we can move forward to make sure that there's fairness associated with enforcement of this particular legislation. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your time.
Thank you, Council Member. And Council Member Gilmore Richardson?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to thank my colleague, Councilmember Jay Young, who represents the 5th Council District, for his advocacy for what we all have known to be a very good business in the 5th District for a very long time, Barbers Hall. I also wanted to thank Councilmember Phillips, who was the sponsor of the bill that we all worked on last year, relative to the responsible business ordinance, and therefore the additional implementation and the work we all did around the budget to ensure that we had appropriate staffing to deal with sort of the regulation end of this bill. And so I just ask that we could have something in writing, some level of documentation regarding the communication process that PPD has with businesses when this particular instance comes to play, so that we fully understand the communication is there and that everyone knows what's expected. But I wanted to thank my colleague for bringing this important issue to our attention so that we can ensure from a regulation standpoint that we have something in writing about what the process looks like moving forward. So thank you, colleague, and thank you to PPD. Thanks to Councilmember Phillips and all of our colleagues for your work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gautier? All right, Councilmember Phillips?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I also want to echo the sentiments of Councilman Gilmore Richardson. Thank you all for being here today. This is, as you know, for several years, we worked on this piece of legislation to define it as the critical nuisance business. And, you know, within the current framework, the Philadelphia Police Department will play an active role in enforcing business operations. And this also helps us with having community and neighborhood enforcement, whereas essentially the business owner has a responsibility to work with the Philadelphia Police Department to really understand what happened during this incident. And also, most importantly, the business owner has the opportunity to receive feedback on how to properly work with the Philadelphia Police Department, as well as find avenues to secure their business even more after a violent incident. So the reason why there's only one time that this is happening, so we can get to a point where it doesn't have to happen again. But I want to thank Councilmember Jeffrey Young for listening and having our conversations before this meeting to really understand how we can make this work. I gather this is more of a regulation concern that he has in terms of how do you coordinate with the police, the commanding officer and the police department to enforce the bill. And hopefully today we can be able to find that out. But I look forward to having this bill remain the way it is, and so that we can continue to try, enhance it as much as possible, but remain the way it is. So I want to thank our colleagues for their support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Phillips. Councilmember Gautier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Jay for the bill as well as Councilmember Phillips, and I am interested to hear the discussion and participate in the discussion, but I did want to just touch for a moment on how important the bill has been for me and my constituents. In the 3rd District, we've been dealing, I would say since the pandemic, with a lot of violence on our neighborhood commercial corridors, and the bill gave us a way to react to that in a better way. Like even, instances that I can remember off of the top of my head, there was a homicide in a store at 40th and Market. There were multiple homicides on 55th and Chester in front of businesses. Just on Friday evening, I had a community meeting about 2 shootings that happened on Lancaster, on a stretch of the 4,000 block of Lancaster Avenue. In one instance, we'd requested a plan to make the area outside of the store safer, because that's what the bill allows us to do. Before we can get the plan, there was another shooting in front of the store, right? And so now we're working with 2 businesses on a 1-block stretch of Lancaster Avenue where there's consistently drug dealing and shootings, and I think that the businesses have to participate in making sure that people are safe. So I understand your very real concerns, but I just also wanted to list that it's been very difficult to deal with these instances of violence, and most of the time when there is a shooting or a homicide in front of a business, in my experience, it's a business that neighbors have been complaining about for a really long time, and we haven't had a lot of tools to really address the issue. So I just wanted to put it on record that that this has been a valuable tool for me and my district, and I'm sure that other district council members have had similar experiences. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hearing no other additional comments, Deputy Healy, just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Squilla. I'm here with Inspector Mike O'Donnell, who oversees our nuisance enforcement unit. I'm here on behalf of the Commissioner, Police Commissioner, and on behalf of the Commissioner, thank you for allowing the Police Department to voice its opinion on the proposed amendments to City Code 9-4400. For those that may not be aware, I was personally involved with Councilmember Bass with the development of the original bill creating the Responsible Business Operations Ordinance, which was ultimately enacted into Section 9-4400 in 2016. I testified in support of this legislation on behalf of the department back then. This was a great piece of legislation designed to directly improve the quality of life throughout Philadelphia. I've been working on nuisance issues in collaboration with the law department under then Chief Deputy City Solicitor Kristen Bray, along with our local, state, and partners for many years. 9-4400 was a great start. But as time moved on, we realized that this ordinance needed to evolve. We needed to expand the scope to address the more types of nuisance behaviors and allow the police department to play an active role in the enforcement of the business ordinance. The question would be why? Simply stated, crime, disorder, and nuisance go hand in hand. As such, under the leadership of Kristen Bray, we worked with Councilmember Phillips, Councilmember Bass, as well as members from this committee to amend 9-4400 for the better. These were not minor amendments, but rather a complete overhaul of the ordinance to address the concerns raised by our communities. So we expanded the scope of the nuisance behaviors, and equally, if not important, we included serious violent behavior, which was never addressed in the earlier version of the ordinance. Simply stated, shootings and homicides occurring in and around nuisance businesses were simply beyond the scope of the ordinance. Further, the police department voluntarily assumed responsibilities with these amendments that would otherwise fall to our partners at L&I. As I stated above, crime, disorder, and nuisance go hand in hand. Therefore, having the PPD at the forefront of enforcing this business ordinance just made sense. In anticipation of this ordinance and the additional duties and responsibilities that would fall or be placed upon the PPD created the Nuisance Enforcement Unit, which now Inspector O'Donnell oversees. This unit coordinates with district captains to enforce chronic nuisance businesses and is responsible for conducting the investigations into all critical nuisance businesses. Every potential critical nuisance business where violence has occurred is fully investigated to determine whether there is any nexus or connection to the violence before any enforcement actually occurs. Only if there's a nexus to this violence or the owners or managers refuse to cooperate in the preliminary investigation does any enforcement action proceed. It is for this reason the PPD must object to the proposed amendments. These amendments will interfere with our relatively newfound ability to immediately respond to violent encounters in businesses. If there is no nexus between the business and the violence that occurs, the business owners have nothing to fear. There is absolutely no need to allow a second violent incident to occur before we, the police department, can take action. This contradicts all the work we put into the 2023 amendment. Since the beginning of this year, just from statistical perspectives, the Nuisance Enforcement Unit has investigated a total of 67 critical nuisances. That's businesses where someone has been shot or injured at, where serious violence has occurred. Of this number, based upon the preliminary investigation, and I'll talk about that in a second, it was determined that 34 of these businesses had absolutely no nexus to the violence that occurred. As such, there were no further enforcement actions. These individuals cooperated with police, and it was over. Conversely, 33 locations were determined to have a nexus with the violence. Of these 33, 9 have been sent to L&I and ceased for not responding to the initial intent to cease letters mailed after the investigation. 6 have since reopened, and an additional 3 that should be opening in the very near future. There have been 12 abatement plans, which are successes, entered into thus far, with several other in the pipeline to be finalized. And lastly, we have about 21 other locations that are currently in pending resolution. So as you can see, the current ordinance is well written, but more importantly, it's working as envisioned and working well. For these reasons, I again would enter the department's objection to amending the current ordinance. Well, that being said, I just want to say very clearly, I understand the council members' perspective of the one incident that occurred. But let me just talk about the preliminary investigations component that we put into policy. And by the way, our directive is online, so everything we have here, who to contact, is actually online. We have a commander's guide for our captains, and it has every step-by-step that goes through the process. What we found out when this ordinance was initially implemented, we were doing the investigations, but we had Macy's. The Macy's incident happened. Basically, that's a violent incident that happened at a business. So the question would be, what do we do with that? It's a large chain. Was it involved? Was it not involved? And the answer is, we don't know. So we have to do an investigation on every business to make sure that there's a nexus. If there is no nexus with the criminal or with the violent activity, then there's no problem. We don't go forward with any actions. But the individuals do have a responsibility under the ordinance to respond to the police department. So I understand you're saying there's a communication breakdown. I'm not going to disagree that there may have been one, but the ability to get in touch with the 22nd District Captain is not that complicated. I'm just saying. So, but we can make this better, and that's what I'm here to say. Okay, but I think we can make this better. If that's the issue at hand, we in our policy, like I said, our policy is a guideline. I'm happy to add additional contact information in that to ensure that there's easier access to the captains themselves. So I can understand if you call the district operations room, I can see where communication failures may have happened. So I can fix that by policy very easily. So I can actually make sure that Inspector O'Donnell's unit includes in the letters, the intent to cease letters, that there's multiple contact locations for every commanding officer. But the preliminary investigations we do are really what I think makes a difference and actually adds to the ordinance that we had it, because quite frankly, you're not going to take action on every business just because something bad happened in there. Clearly, that's not the case. If the business is not cooperating, or they're facilitating the conditions that allow things to happen, those are the places, and only those places are the ones that this action or that ordinance should be applied to. So I agree, it shouldn't be on everyone, but we're making sure that we only go after those that we have credible evidence, and we maintain documentation as to the nexus statement, or basically we call it a nexus statement, which is equivalent to a probable cause statement.
Thank you for your testimony. One quick question before I turn it over to Councilmember Young, and I know because we have also used this piece of legislation in my district, and Inspector O'Donnell, I just want to ask for clarity. I understand that a lot of times it initiated from the captain, but doesn't it too then go to the nuisance task force or your department to oversee the incidents that were reported to make sure they reach those Nexus goals and how then it would be enforced? Because it's not totally just the captain, is that correct?
Yeah, we're talking about critical nuisances, not the chronic.
Say that again?
We're talking about the critical nuisances is one violent incident happens at a location. The other ones are the chronic nuisances where they have to
Right.
have 3 within a
Okay.
year. So,
I'm making about the
Chronic.
chronic
Gotcha.
nuisances.
So the chronic ones stay with the CAMs, and then they come up to us after they had 3 violations to our unit to investigate and then go forward with.
yeah,
So
and-
they stay with the captains first.
Yes, and the reason for that is the notice of intent to cease operation is a legal document that basically initiates the legal process against the business. What happens is the centralized unit, the captains will figure out the 3 violations, forward the paperwork electronically to the nuisance unit, and then the nuisance unit will collaborate with the law department and L&I, primarily first with the law department to see whether or not we have nexus, and if we have nexus, the connection between the activities, then we forward the package up the information out to L&I, and we forward the new notice of intent to cease operations.
And that's what I was referring to, because it seems like it still goes to the nuisance task force or the nuisance department to finalize that. It's just not, even though they had the 3 violations, it's not,
Correct.
it's still not an automatic.
Yes. We fine-tune that with the new amendments that happened in 2023 and the implementation of the nuisance unit, because like I said, we want to make sure there's consistency across the entire city. So I didn't want to have 21 or 20 different captains doing notices of intent drafted differently. So we work with the law department that the language is correct, and they review all the notices of, intent, the nexus statement, which is equivalent to like a probable cause statement. And they look at that to see whether or not there's enough information or enough data to move forward. And many times they'll turn around and say, no, there's not enough, or go see if you can find something more videotape or something along those lines. But we work hand in hand with the law department.
And what happens during that time if there isn't 3, doesn't it start over again?
Which time?
If there's 3 violations,
It's three within a year now.
right, so now the year is up. Now it continues, so you still have to have 3 within a year at any time, correct?
Well, the good thing about this, and this is the reason why, Councilmember Phillips was when we announced our nuisance tracker, we do electronically track. Because what happens is once you have your first violation, the business, I'm referring to chronic nuisance, not critical.
Chronic, not.
We have to notify the business. We put you on notice, we send you a letter, be advised, X, Y, and Z happened at your location. They don't have to do anything to us, we're just putting them on notice. Second time, we send them a second letter. Well, oftentimes, in that letter, it says, if you have any concerns, please contact the captain. We were incredibly successful with the first letter. First letter goes out, a lot of times the business owners are not necessarily the ones that are running the business per se, and they get notice of this, and the first thing they do is reach out to the captain and say, what's going on, what can I do to fix this problem? Because our primary goal, and I think this was clear throughout the whole process of this legislation, we're not looking to shut businesses down. We just want them to be good neighbors. So the issue is, a lot of times they're reaching out after that first letter and things are being resolved. And what we do is we enter into what's called an abatement plan. So if the issue is you should have more cameras, you should have better lighting, you should have gun or metal scanners, that goes into an abatement agreement. If that abatement agreement gets signed off, that's done. It goes no further than there. Now, if they violate the abatement agreement, then we go to the law department and we step back into the intent to cease. But we've been able to avoid that. So we're tracking, I don't have the specific numbers now, but we track the success with the first letter, the second letter, and the third letter is obviously a notice of intent to cease. They haven't responded by that time.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. Councilmember Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions on Nexus. Can you describe to us what the department uses as the definition of a nexus to violence?
A nexus is a connection or that's the best way to say it. If we can articulate that the conditions that the owner allowed at that location were in any way contributory to the problem, to the violence or anything along those lines. If there's a lot of violence out there, it's never been addressed. If they have problems and they've never gotten a security guard. So it's on a case-by-case basis, and that's why, just like the district attorney's office reviews a probable cause statement, we too have the law department looking at our nexus statements because we want a fair and objective review before we move forward. So we'll put the facts down, and if they don't think we have enough evidence of nexus or a connection between the business owner being involved or actually allowing the activities to fester in a way, then we won't move forward. The law department won't allow us.
Thank you. I think an issue that I have with the language of the code is, so yes, I understand the nexus, but then it says, or if the owners or managers refuse to cooperate with the preliminary investigation, right?
Right.
And so is an owner not knowing information, can that be deemed as a refusal to cooperate with the investigation?
No, but if they don't respond they have an affirmative duty to respond within so many days after they get the notice of intent to cease. They have to reach out to us. At that point in time, a lot of times, like I said, we've resolved most of these in the first letter when they come out. So even with the critical nuisance, we were getting into a lot of abatements. A lot of individuals just say, listen, there's crime all around my neighborhood. I don't know how to do anything. And the district captain can step in and try to come up with some type of collaboration, and so we can actually help. But the issue is they have to cooperate and interact. They have to interact with the process. And if they don't, then that within the statute or with the ordinance, within 5 days, that triggers the next level, going to the L&I.
Thank you for that clarity, which moves into my next question is, where is it defined, or how is a business owner notified of that, that communication between themselves and the district? Like, how is that spelled out? How is the administrative review requested, and to whom?
Yeah, they received the letter on the notice of intent to cease. They're given contact information and the captain's personal information to contact.
Right, and if that captain then says, I'll call you back, and it never responds, then what's the recourse for the business owner?
You raise a good point. I mean, the issue is what could we do better? I mean, what I can do is make sure that it's done by email, so there's documentation of a failure to respond. But I've never had a captain not, but I can see where miscommunications can happen. But I can fix that clearly with my directive by adding additional contact information.
Are there objective standards or protocols in place if after the administrative review has taken place, and the reviewing official says the owner has still failed to satisfy like certain conditions, like how can they, basically who determines that? Who determines that, you know what, we don't like your plan, so you need to do something else?
The police department has been given that authority up front with with this new ordinance, but we collaborate with L&I.
And under, I guess, the current code, is this, do you have a subset of standards that you look for when folks enter into abatement plan, or how they demonstrate to the department that remedial measures are taken into place? Like, is this subjective, or there's objective standards, or is it discretionary amongst the departments? Like, what standards are there to say that this business will be treated like that other business too?
Well, the proposed abatement plan reconciliations are listed in the ordinance. So we use that ordinance as a basis of some of the things that we should use. And we work and collaborate. Like I said, we're trying not to shut a business down. We're trying to keep it open. So the issue is oftentimes it's a negotiation between the captain and the business owner. Say, listen, these are the things we believe would help with the crime that you're having, or something along those lines. So we're trying to get them together. So what we use that as a guide. I think there's 20, there might be 18 or 20 different recommendations for the abatement plan. And we use that as a guide.
And so in this current code, again, if owners or managers refuse to cooperate with the preliminary investigation, then actions can proceed. But in any current law ordinance, can a business owner be charged criminally for obstruction of an investigation if they don't, if they are not cooperative with these types of investigations?
No.
And so if they're not charged criminally in this matter, then why are we holding them to I guess it seems to be a higher standard to cooperate with certain investigations dealing with these instances of like critical nuisances?
This is the city ordinance as to intent to cease operations. They have to participate once the intent to cease operations is issued. That's outside the scope of the PPD.
And can you define for us what is the preliminary investigation in this? Like, what do you do? What matters are taken into consideration during a preliminary investigation?
Yeah. When there's a shooting or a homicide that happens in a business, One of the detectives assigned to Inspector O'Donnell will go on scene. They'll gather all the other additional information from the divisional detectives based upon the shooting, so they have that body of information. And then they'll interview and talk to the business owners and managers as to what happened. And based upon the facts and circumstances, they'll put a nexus statement, or quite frankly, it'll be a no nexus statement if there's nothing attached there. We investigate all of them, but I need to say, well, why did we not go on one and why did we go on the other? So we have those statements and we maintain those statements. So there'll be either a statement of nexus, there is a connection, or she'll do an investigation. There's two female detectives, that's why I say she. They'll do the investigation and they'll put up, and it gets submitted to myself and it gets submitted to the law department to review. And if there's no nexus, I look at that to make sure that there is in fact no connection. If there's no connection, that's the end of the matter.
And just one final question. When regarding the, I guess the actual cease operations that's issued by, essentially that's issued by the Department of License and Inspection and not the police, is there any, the 5-day period that the owner has to contact the police captain, right, essentially, is there any appeals process for that owner if they say they don't believe that they should be even investigated under this particular nuisance, under this particular code? Is there a process for them to appeal that determination so they won't have to call the police within that 5 days to even start this process?
Well, what happens is when we do the paperwork, we send it off to L&I. L&I will then, before they ever do the cease operations, they reach out as well. So there's another opportunity for the business owner to interact with L&I. So nothing's shut down based on our say-so alone. It would actually then be either the failure to cooperate with L&I or L&I determines that there's something else wrong there. So L&I would then make that call, but they don't unilaterally do it on our paperwork. It's like a separate, the business actually have like almost a second bite at the apple to interact. If they didn't want to interact, let's say, assume they didn't want to talk to the police. When L&I gets involved, they have the opportunity to intervene and negotiate with L&I to make it go away, just like they would have with us. So there's actually two shots at the apple for businesses before anything happens about them being closed.
So I can say in the case that the reason why I brought this up, that did not happen. That there was no opportunity to speak with L&I on this. In fact, it was primarily, and we all know that if the police tell L&I, hey, look, this is a bad business under this particular law, L&I is going to do what the police say. Because essentially, again, like you mentioned, the police have taken over the duties of enforcement for this particular section in the code. And so I just want to make sure that we have a set of standards that all police captains, all districts are utilizing when they're enforcing this legislation. Because again, the discretion that can be used from captain to captain based on the type of business that is in that particular area can create a lot of gray areas. And for business owners who are good business owners who just happen to have an incident outside or near their establishment, and to then say, oh, because you don't know information, but we think you know, but you're telling us you don't know, now we're going to say you're refusing to cooperate with us, so now we're going to come down and enforce this law on you. I think that kind of is, I think it arbitrarily sets up disputes between that business owner and police that doesn't have to be there if we are able to see a set of standards, a set of protocols that everyone is playing by, and the business owners themselves know how to then navigate this bureaucratic process when they get hit with one of these violations or potential violations. I think we need to have clear rules on how to request administrative review, how to do all these things. So a step-by-step guide for business owners to navigate this process. And I don't know if that exists or not, but we should be encouraging that.
As for the appeal process, anything that goes through, the appeal process still is intact. So it's not like anything that happens with L&I, we're operating basically as an agent for L&I, can be appealable. So all that is appealable. Anybody has an opportunity to appeal any actions of the government agency when it comes to a business.
Yeah, but is the method of communication between the business owner and the police spelled out somewhere, like on how they need to communicate with the police officer? Because essentially, say it's a phone call, right? But like you get a phone number. But if that, again, if the police is not responding to that phone call, then is there another method where the business owner can fulfill their duty, right, to communicate with the police?
our policies are actually put in on a directive, it's online. And part of that is their sample letters that are attached that you'll actually receive. They're formatted letters. But to your point, I can add additional contact information for the specific captains and ensure that they're put on those letters. But what I also want to touch on consistency. Consistency is the very reason why we created this unit, is to make sure that 21 different captains didn't view things differently. So they may have chronic nuisances in one area of the city, and they're being much more aggressive than you would say in another part. That's where Inspector O'Donnell's group gets to see it and be consistent and make sure we're treating all businesses fairly. So that's really one of the primary reasons for creating the unit, is to facilitate that consistency and fairness.
Is it possible that when a business get hit with one of these violations, that they can be, you say the directives are online, a business owner doesn't know to go online to police website to check on what their procedures are for them. So is it possible that we can, once a violation is been given or they get that notice in the mail, can we also send them what the directives are so they know how to again proceed? Because they're not going to, I didn't know, right? They're not going to know to go online to the police website to look at what the directives are.
Listen, this is very good information. I'm happy to, like I said, we constantly evolve and change. We're happy to put more contact information in the letters, but also make a notice or a reference to our website so they can look at it. Our website is basically designed as I named it a commander's guide for nuisance enforcement. It's a step-by-step. But as a business owner, you can go through the step-by-steps and very clearly understand where you fit and what your responsibilities are, but just by reading our directive. But I can tighten up the letters that go out to make sure that more contact information is provided. In the event you can't by one means, here's a secondary means. And I'll even try to put a third means in there as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Young. Are there any other questions to Deputy Healy or Inspector O'Donnell? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. And we will now move on to, is there anybody else here to testify on bill number 240582? Seeing none, thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. McMonigle, can you please read the title of the resolution 240314?
Resolution number 240314, a resolution authorizing the Council Committee on Commerce and Economic Development to hold hearings to investigate commercial office building market viability in Center City, Philadelphia.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can we please have James Eros?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, before.
Councilmember Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As one of the members who represent parts of Center City, I like to say Market Street is, our city's most important commercial corridor here. It was important to me to introduce this legislation, understanding that certain significant challenges that our city faces in our Center City commercial office building space. We want to hear from the industry experts to see how we as a city can do better at retention in our commercial office building space, but also to figure out how we can work together to ensure that our city continues to grow during this challenging time. I mean, when we look at some of the numbers, there are a lot of buildings in Center City that are considered to be distressed. And in the real estate market business, that's not a good thing. There are a number of buildings that are in bankruptcy right now. And so we want to make sure that as a city, we still try to capture that value for our city, because our tax base depends on Center City. And I want to make sure that there are things in place where we can continue to capture that growth, like other cities are doing, and to really partner with the private sector on ensuring that our city has the tools in place to keep us moving in the right direction. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me that time.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you for introducing this resolution. AJ, if you want to just state your name for the record and then pursue your testimony.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Squilla and members of the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. My name is James Arrows Jr., and I am the Chief Assessment Officer for the City's Office of Property Assessment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on resolution number 240314. OPA has closely monitored the activity of the Center City office market over the past several years. OPA utilizes the income capitalization approach when valuing Center City office buildings. Earlier this spring, OPA completed our tax year 2025 revaluation and certified those assessments, which were developed using market data through June 30th, 2023. The total assessed value as of that certification for office buildings in the Center City submarkets, as designated by OPA, was approximately $8.78 billion. For comparison, when OPA completed the most recent prior citywide revaluation for tax year 2025, which used market data through June 30th, 2021, the total assessed value as of that certification for office buildings in the Center City submarkets, as designated by OPA, was approximately $9.82 billion. The decrease of over $1 billion in assessed value from tax year 2023 to tax year 2025 reflects recent changes in the office market attributed to several factors, including higher vacancy rates and higher capitalization rates, which is a real estate metric that estimates the rate of return on an investment property. This concludes my testimony, and I am available to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank
have
you.
one.
Oh, Councilmember Young?
Yes. Thank you for your testimony. When OPA, you said you utilized the income capitalization approach when determining the values of Center City. Where do you get this data from when you're collecting the incomes from the district buildings?
Sure. So we were able to get some commercial data for all commercial properties, but in this case, obviously, we're talking about office buildings through CoStar, which is an industry program that can give either sales or rental information. And we also utilize several commercial-specific appraisal firms in the area that are able to give us insight on market data, what rents and rates and everything are going for. So those are two of our most primary sources of data as far as what's going on in the market when we do these valuations.
And is there any differences when doing evaluations regarding the different classes of commercial real estate, Class A, B, things like that?
Yep. So we'll break out. So my testimony reference numbers for Center City overall. So there are 3 submarkets included with that. So we have Market West, Market East, and Independence Hall as we designate it. So you could have a different rate or factor for a location, and then there's your classes, so trophy A, B, C. Some of those rates figures might end up being identical, but we break it out so that way if there are differences, we would reflect that in the assessments, and we can, when we do the calculations, if there's a cap rate difference between classes or vacancy or whatever, we have that data available to us in doing the values.
And I guess that decrease in over $1 billion in the value, can you tell us what, I guess from a revenue perspective, how much revenue loss that is to the city of Philadelphia?
I would not be the person to give you that answer. We're not looking at the actual revenue. We're just trying to get the valuations right. And that number includes some exempt values, so it's not all a taxable loss there. But we're not doing revenue calculations for the city, so I would not be the person to answer that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Gautier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Were there any defining characteristics of properties that were worth less in 25, or was kind of just everything valued at a lesser amount?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of an overall perspective, so when we're doing the values, we're doing income approach, we call it a stabilized income approach. So we're taking a class of properties and we're assuming certain factors for everything in that class. The reality of individual buildings may differ, and that's where we get people to come in and appeals, but when we're doing mass appraisal, we're not going to do 1,300 individual values across the city. We're using standard rates for class, location, all that. But just to give you the difference, for the Center City properties, in tax year 2023, the vacancy rates that we use as part of that standardized capitalization, the range was 8 to 12% depending on where they were in Center City in the class. For 2025, that range increased to 10 to 20% on a standardized. So right there, if you're on that high end, that 20%, and that's obviously a significant increase from what we were looking at in 23. Likewise, cap rates went up anywhere from 10 to 15%. So, when you're looking at that, the higher the cap rate, the potential lower rate of return. So when you're looking at either cost of building or cost in lending, those are two big factors with the way the commercial lending, well, all lending rates really, but particularly in this case, commercial lending rates have increased. That is a huge factor in some of those cap rates going up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Mr. McGonigal, can you please call the next panel to testify?
Can we please have Will Carter?
Okay, Will, thank you for testifying. Just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. William Carter, Vice President, Local Government Affairs for the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. First time I've been a panel by myself, so kind of enjoying this. Good afternoon, Chairman Squilla, Councilman Young, and members of the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Once again, William Carter, Vice President of Local Government Affairs for the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and a founding member of the Inclusive Growth Coalition. And I want to thank you again for allowing me to testify today. People often ask, what is inclusive growth? And quite simply, it means growth of the entire interdependent business ecosystem. So that means micro, small, mid-size, and large. And when businesses of all demographics grow, they hire, which is of particular importance to City Council and the Mayor, I'm sure. So it's good we're having this discussion today. As with any delicate ecosystem, maintenance of and support are critical, and any disruption will have ripple effects. This is no different when it comes to maintaining a strong and attractive office market in Philadelphia. It's well documented that Philadelphia already has fewer private employers of all demographics than comparable locales, and very few for-profit companies at the top of the city's largest employer list. This dearth of businesses has contributed to a 23% loss in job growth since 1970, and the recent pandemic only exacerbated this statistic. Study after study has shown that business density correlates with fewer business startups, lower economic output, and higher poverty within areas. According to data compiled by the Center City District in 2019, there were more than 50,000 daily visits on an average weekday from non-resident workers in the West Market Street and JFK office district. And in 2020, that dropped to fewer than 5,000 commuters. In 2023, there were roughly 30,000 such commuters going to work in office buildings west of City Hall, data shows. When there's less demand for office leases, building owners can't sustain that business model, which leads to buildings sitting around, which leads to less workers within city limits, which leads to less foot traffic for small and diverse businesses, and the entire ecosystem I discussed earlier. And then it also leads to a lower tax base for the city of Philadelphia. So it stands to reason that Philadelphia has to maintain the viability of its office market to keep employers and jobs in the city. With adequate investment in maintaining a strong office market and attracting employers, Philadelphia can increase business activity, foot traffic on our commercial corridors, and more overall dollars flowing throughout Philadelphia, which will importantly grow jobs and an increased tax base for public services here in our city. And I thank you for your time. So I should get one question. This is my only panel. I'm the soloist.
Councilmember Young.
Yes, thank you, Will, for your testimony. Can you talk to us about how the vacancies really affect the business-to-business commerce market here in our city?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we talk about all the time. Inclusive growth means everyone making a good living, inclusively, whether they work for themselves or others. And so when you have a small business, generally, obviously, that's usually a mom and pop, and we're really talking about micro businesses. Small businesses can be up to 10 employees or maybe a little bit more. Mid-sized businesses and large businesses, so forth, with the amount of people they employ. So the more people who are in office buildings here, more businesses here, and more people who are in office buildings here, the more foot traffic we have throughout the city for small and micro businesses. Could be, once again, your mom and pop. For mid-sized businesses who could be delivering services to these companies in these office buildings. And more importantly, more dollars, economic dollars from the tax base for the city of Philadelphia to grow and be able to sustain our programs and services that we have throughout the city. So it's an interdependent ecosystem. You want growth from all, and other cities are substantially invested in business growth. Right now, we are just above Detroit. I don't like to say that out loud, but it is